So you might be wondering what we're doing here today. And what we're going to do is try to install a vermifilter toilet. And you might be wondering, what on earth is a vermifilter toilet? Well, essentially, it's an environmentally friendly composting toilet that you can flush. To tell you the truth, I don't need a flush toilet. I'm happy with an outhouse. But in a couple of months from now, we've got our first retreat here at the Hermitage. And to be honest, some people aren't that comfortable with pooping in a hole in the ground. So what we're going to do is install this flushable alternative that's good for the environment, also requires no permit, and can be installed at a fraction of the cost of even the smallest septic tank. What we need for the composter is a container. You can use all kinds of containers, but I've got an IBC. And where did I get this from? Well, when I bought that little red Ford Ranger, the guy gave it to me for free as a sweetener on the deal. So this is where the worms live. And for that we need to build a little house. It needs to be insulated because they don't want to get too cold in winter and they don't want to get too hot in summer. And so our first job is to level off this area, make a little foundation, and build a little house for our vermifilter. So you probably wonder what I'm doing here. Well, I don't have any cement for the bricks, and so what I'm going to use is an earthen mortar. And you probably think that's going to be really weak and unsatisfactory, but when I was in Nepal, then the driver's house was built out of bricks and mud. And we had the biggest earthquake in 100 years, and that building didn't fall down, it didn't crack, it was totally stable. Not only that, it's been there for about 30 years. And besides, we're just making a little house for the container. And so I think this is going to do absolutely fine. So what I'm doing is I'm taking a bit of mud, sifting it out, and I added some basalt sand, which was left over from drilling the well. And we'll make a little cement with that, and do a line of bricks, put a bit of damp-proof course on top of that, and build a small 2x4 stud frame, and fill it with insulation for the IBC. So we've just finished digging the drain field for the vermifilter. So the digester tank then emits liquid. It's not very nice. And we need a drain field so that can absorb back into the ground without causing smell. It's all part of the composting process. And so the next thing we need to do is insert some pipe. And the important thing is that the drain field pipe is perforated. It's like a land drain, and that means the water can seep back into the soil. We've also built a pit here. It's a little bit deeper. And with that, what we're going to do is make a soak away. That will take the grey water from the shower and the sink in the cabin and then deposit it into a pit, probably some plastic containers filled with rocks, and it can soak back into the ground without flooding the land. And then after we've built our drain field, what we'll do is we'll plant on top of that things like roses, plants that like nitrogen. They're an indicator as to whether or not the digester tank is working properly. If the digester tank is clogged, it will not be putting nitrogen back into the soil, and we'll see because the leaves on the roses will become brown. So that's what we're going to do now. Now the question is, what are you going to do with your grey water? That's the water from your shower and your sink from washing dishes. So originally in this log cabin, then a pipe came under the cabin and just dumps on the ground. And you get lots of mosquitoes and lots of smell and mess. So what you need is a soak away. And usually you'll dig a big pit, put some concrete rings in it, and line the bottom with gravel, and then put a lid on the top. And you pour the water into that and it slowly soaks away into the ground. Well, I'm going to do it a kind of bodge way, hillbilly style, and that's using old drink crates, plastic crates, and filling them full of stones. These crates were here when I arrived, so I may as well recycle them, and it'll do just as good a job. So this is our pipe coming down from the house. That's got to dump into a pit, and we've got to make sure it doesn't collect, but slowly soaks away. So I've got a bunch of these plastic drink containers. They can go into the hole, and we can fill them full of stones and stack them up. That should do the job. Certainly plenty of stones around here. Make sure it's kind of level when you start. So now I just want to insert this pipe into the center of the soak away, and I'm going to cut a hole in the side because this is going to stick slightly up over the ground. It'll be surrounded by some stone and covered with a slab. That's so we can inspect it if it gets clogged. So one of the most important elements of the Vermifilter toilet is the drain field. And I think a lot of people overlook this. I've seen some people just take a pipe and they just pour it onto the top of the soil somewhere. But really you don't want a big stinky puddle of waste coming out, the discharge from your digester. You want a big drain field and you want that to soak away into the ground slowly so it doesn't become bogged down and it doesn't stink. Also, the discharge from the tank is quite filthy, so you want it naturally to be able to be absorbed into the soil, and you want the worms and the organic matter in your bed to help you digest it, basically, compost it. So what we have here is a nice little trench that my friend built. But if you take the level, what you'll find is that it's not going to drain. The most important thing is that from the discharge pipe, it goes downhill into the branches. And then from the center of that, each of those branches needs to go downhill. This side's fine. It's got a really nice slope. But if we look on the other side here, where the perforated pipe's going to go, then that's actually going uphill. So what I need to do is I need to dig this trench down a little bit on this side. So you want the branches, a bit like a tree, to just very slightly slope downhill from the discharge pipe. And really you want the biggest possible drain field as you can build. If you've got more than one tank or a larger tank, it would be much bigger than this. But here our soil drains very well. I'm not so much worried about a big puddle forming or getting damp because there's very little clay in the soil, but I still want that effluent, that discharge to spread out in the ground. I don't want it to be stinky, and I want it to naturally compost into the soil. So first thing I need to do is make sure this side, these branches of the drain field are downhill from the discharge pipe. So now we've got all our bits in place roughly, and we've got to glue them together. I think the best thing to do is glue it all together and then check again to make sure that it's going to drain properly using the spirit level. And once it's all finished, then we can also do a test. We can run some water through the drainage system. So you're going to need some ABS glue for this stuff. If you're going to go into PVC or something like that, you'll need transition glue. But we're not too worried if it actually leaks, because actually this thing is designed to leak. It's just a sophisticated leaking machine, basically. So make sure you clean the joints before you glue them a little bit. I use white vinegar. They sell expensive stuff for cleaning the joints, but it seems to work perfectly fine. And as I said, then if it leaks, that's not a problem. In fact, the entire thing is designed to leak. You just want it to leak in a sophisticated way. So I've got a 2-inch to 1.5-inch reducer, and then I'm going to put a T on that. It's actually a 4-way, 1.5-inch 4-way. I couldn't find a 4-way and 2-inch. Make sure the perforations on your pipe are on the bottom, facing down. We only drilled perforations on 3 sides and left the top blank, so that it doesn't immediately fill up with dirt. So this is a very important component of the whole system. This is a perforated sewer pipe, 3 inches. It has to sit inside the digester tank, and it allows the liquid to drain off. It's important that the worms don't drown, and they're an aerobic composter. So what they do is they need oxygen, and if it's filled with water, it doesn't drain off, it'll become clogged and the worms will die. And it keeps the entire digester dry. So we insert this into the tank, and we cover this with some mesh, and it allows the water to drain off without getting clogged. This perforated pipe came with holes only drilled in 2 places, so I'm going to drill a few more holes to increase the draining ability. I got this piece of pipe for free when I went to the plumber's because it was just left discarded. It's a bit fragile. That doesn't actually matter. Its job is just to allow the tank to drain so liquid doesn't collect. In the tank we'll have a layer of stones. That's to help with the drainage. This will be covered in some fly screen material that will stop it from allowing particles like toilet paper, etc., to go in between the stones and clog up. And we're going to cover this entire pipe in the same material as well, as a kind of filter. So I've got a 90-degree bend in the same material, PVC, and this has to go into ABS. So what I'm using is a transition glue. This will stick to both PVC and ABS. So it's a bit more expensive than your normal PVC or ABS glue, so you don't waste it. And then a transition piece, because the pipe sizes are a little bit different. When you start using lots of adapters and things, it can get quite expensive. This seems to be the cheapest way of doing it. If you start putting on these fancy elbows, etc., then you're going to start running into a really high cost. So this will also glue ABS to ABS. There we go. And now we just need a little bit of 1.5 inch to go on there. Also, it doesn't hurt to put a few holes in the bend. As long as you cover the whole thing in netting so the holes don't get clogged. This stuff is extremely cheap, and it's much tougher than the white fly screen net that you get. It's a bit stiffer, will hold its shape better. You need enough to wrap around this thing. And then we'll connect that with zip ties. Now, I don't have any long zip ties, but it's quite easy to make long ones if you put one into the other. And they'll be long enough. Flip this over a few times. I think you get the idea. And then you can make it nice and tight. Put a bit on the bottom. So the next thing we need to do is cut an access hatch in the digester tank. That's because somebody's actually going to get inside and then lay the pipe and lay the filter screen, etc. And you want to be able to inspect it from time to time. For example, if it's getting clogged, you want to see what's clogging it up. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut some of these bars off and make a bit of space so I can get in there. There's going to be some sharp edges in there, so you want to get in there and take the burrs off so you don't cut yourself. Now we got to cut a hole in this thing. It's big enough for somebody my size to climb into. Generally, I don't like reciprocal saws. They're very inaccurate and they don't cut very well. Very messy, and I don't think they do that good a job. You can't really control it or do accurate cuts, but for this sort of thing, they're perfect. And when you do this job, don't get all fussy. I mean, after all, it's going to be literally full of shit. So what I noticed some people trying to do was to mate up a 2-inch pipe with the output, the discharge from the tank. And that's just going to cause a headache. Also, it's not going to fit, so it's going to be kind of loose. But what I found is that the 1.5 inch flexible pulley pipe would fit in there exactly into that hole. And that means when you put the drain pipe in, you don't have to try to balance it while you fill the stones. You can jam it in there. And in fact, I've cut it so it's just the right height, so I can jam it underneath the lid with the top of the IBC, and then you can just pour your stones in. And so I measured my piece of pipe, and I've got a 2-foot piece of this 1.5 inch poly pipe. I put some screen on it as well so it doesn't get clogged. And I'm going to set the drain pipe to the back of the tank slightly, because I want the waste to come in the center, and I also want to be able to access from the front to clean it out or fork it over if I need to. And if this drain pipe is here in front, it's going to be an obstacle. So I'm going to set it to the back of the tank. First thing I need to do is glue that. And then the other end will just jam in. Probably I should be using that transition glue for this. It is a thicker build, but once this is dry, it'll be tight enough, it'll be strong enough. Okay. So that's our discharge pipe. We just need to let that dry. So now the glue's dry on the discharge pipe. We're going to stick it in there. I'm going to try to jam it in under the back of the tank and insert it directly into the output, the discharge of the tank. So what we've got is this drainage pipe. It's a perforated sewer pipe. And then the discharge hole is here. A little bit of poly pipe connecting the two with screen and drainage holes, and now we can just fill the lot with some stones. So now it's actually time to get inside the tank. We need to put this filter mesh inside. I made it a little bit bigger than the interior of the tank, so you can put the edges up the sides, and I cut a small hole in the center there for the drain pipe. I'm going to climb in and try to insert this in place and pin it down with some rocks. So I'm going to insert it over the top of this pipe, bring it down through the hole nicely, and then lay it in the bottom of the tank on top of the stones. This is pretty tough stuff, so there's not much chance of ripping it. You should try to check and make sure the stones are pretty level before you do this. And we can just take some of the stones from the inside and put them on top of the net to hold it into place. I recommend you only do this after the glue is already dried, because there's very little ventilation in here. And then the next step is to take some rotted woody material, shavings, tree bark, dry leaves, anything that's brown, really. That's going to help your digester work much more efficiently. And it's going to give the worms somewhere to live. Help the process of decomposing. Just tuck the corners in a bit. When you put your tree bark, etc. on top, it will hold the screen down anyway. And then hopefully I won't have to do that again anytime soon. Okay, a couple of final things to do here with the digester tank. We have to connect the waste pipe, so we'll glue in a piece on there of 3-inch waste pipe, bring it down into the hole. Here we do have to be a bit careful about it leaking, because we don't want shitty water dripping down the side of the tank. Wouldn't be pleasant. We're going to put a little drop pipe on that as well, just to make sure it goes in the hole. And in the digester tank, then we want to put a few kitchen scraps, and also we want to add some worms to that. Really, we want to create a colony of digesting worms, and really the Canadian Night crawlers aren't so good. What we need are red wigglers or European night crawlers, what they call super reds. I haven't found any available around here. The problem with the fat earthworms is that they like to burrow very deep and they like a cool climate. And they also don't propagate so quickly. The red wigglers propagate like mad. They like decomposing the excrement that's sitting on the top of the ground. Another thing you can do is find animal dung. For example, cow dung is really good, and that will have lots of worms in it. And so you put in a bit of compost, a bit of kitchen scraps, some animal dung or some worms if you can find some. You can get them online, for example. And then what you want to do is maybe do your first poo in there and leave it for a while for the colony to establish before you start using it full time. Once the colony is established, then you can use the toilet full time. The other thing we need to do is make a cover for the top of this. It needs to be protected from the heat of the sun and also cold in winter. So we'll make a slightly slanted roof here and something to cover the face that's insulated just like the other sides of the wall. So we're nearly there. Well, you guys probably know this stuff already. Got a wax seal for the toilet. Gonna install that. It's gotta be a little bit warm, the wax seal. This one's a bit too warm. It's all gooey. See it in there, in the center. Just on. Okay, now we're gonna stick the jaw on. And now what we gotta do is sit on it and squash it down. All we gotta do is bolt it down, tighten it onto the wax seal. So now our Vermifilter toilet is nearly ready for use. And there's one really important point, and I think many people miss this out, but you absolutely have to have a healthy colony of worms. And that means that the tank has to be aerated. It can't be soggy, damp mess. It has to drain into the drain field. There has to be food for them to eat. It has to be the right temperature. That's why we insulate the box. And you have to have worms. Now you can find animal manure, like cow dung, that's fresh, lying on the ground, and worms will be attracted to that. You can add it to your tank. If you do that, you're going to have to build up your colony slowly. And there are companies that provide composting worms. So these would be red wigglers or European night crawlers. They're not the same as fish bait worms, the big fat ones. They prefer a warmer environment and they're not so deep burrowing. So places like Canadian Tire actually sell composting worms, but they're usually out of stock. And so you have to order them online. And they sell them on Amazon. I don't know if they'll arrive alive. But what I found was a company in northern Alberta called Worm Era. And they send the worms in the post, and they send them guaranteed to arrive alive. So they take care to make sure that your worms arrive in a good condition. It's really important. The other thing is that you have to let the colony grow. Basically, they will propagate depending on how much food there is there. So if there's one person using the toilet, there'll be a certain amount of worms. If there's more, there'll be more worms. So you've got to build up to it. Now I built this container for the digester tank, and the lid is removable. And this is so you can do maintenance and you can inspect the tank. If it's soggy, wet mess, it means your drain system isn't working. You've got to unblock it. It's really important. This one has two removable panels. One's for the roof, and there's a lower panel here that comes off so you can climb in the tank and do work if you need to. So what you need to add in here are the worms, and they have to have something to eat. So they need a little bit of kitchen scraps. You can add a bit of compost, a little bit of manure. And so what we did was we added our worm bag in here, which itself is compostable, and the colony of worms seemed pretty healthy. And then there's one last very important thing you need to do. And that is, you just gotta feed the worms. Oh yeah, another thing. Try not to give them too much toilet paper to start with. Toilet paper doesn't break down very easily. Really, the best thing is if you get some good bamboo toilet paper, or toilet paper that's specifically intended for a septic tank. We use Who Gives a Crap. It's a New Zealand company, and they're very environmentally minded. For example, there's absolutely zero plastic packaging, and they're nicely printed in environmentally friendly inks. So now I'm going to test out our Vermifilter toilet, and we'll see you next time.